Britain building again faster. This is always plugged at the moment with the government to get things going, and we're being lazy as developers and not pushing forward, and we're land banking, we're not delivering. I implore everyone to make sure that your planning officers do for you is they send you a draft copy of the planning conditions, because ultimately almost 4 out of the 7 or 8 planning conditions were bullshit in terms of when they require the information to be provided. Get Britain building again. This is always plugged at the moment with the government to get things going, and we're being lazy as developers and not pushing forward, and we're land banking, we're not delivering. And there was something that happened this week with our scheme in Abingdon, our high street scheme, which was the old Halifax Bank, where we've got the rear planning application in, which is to convert and extend the rear part of the building into 4 flats. We've got the planning approval on the listed building consent to the front of the site to convert to 3 HMOs, and the retail space is currently being sold. So I was focusing on the rear. I had an email from the planning consultant, which was a great email in terms of here's a list of planning conditions that the planning officer wants to put on your planning approval. So ultimately, we know that they are minded to approve it, and now they're just dotting the I's, crossing the T's in terms of what planning conditions go on there. And this is something that I implore everyone to make sure that your planning officers do for you is they send you a draft copy of the planning condition. I don't know if it's like a legal requirement or whether it has to be sort of requested, but I don't see it on every single scheme. But when it's important to do so, I will always try and request before they send that decision notice out that we do get to see a list of those planning conditions. And this is why, because ultimately almost 4 out of the 7 or 8 planning conditions were bullshit in terms of when they require the information to be provided. I'll give you an example. Point number 3 was about an archaeological assessment and having a watching brief. So somebody coming in from an archaeological background and making sure that as you are literally digging the foundations, you are not hitting an old skeleton or digging up some Roman coins, all that sort of stuff that they want to look at. Now, you can't see what the scheme is that we've got here, but ultimately it's an undercroft with floors above that we're adding an airspace extra floor to. And then we're only really digging a small portion of the undercroft to create a 1-bedroom flat on the ground floor level. So I think we'll end up having probably 2 runs of strip foundation that we're going to be digging in that undercroft. And they wanted for that watching brief and agreement to be in place before any development starts on site. So based on that planning condition, we can't even demolish the roof, strip out the services, do anything above first floor level that we could be cracking on with before we even start digging into the ground. So this is where you should be really forceful in trying to get those planning conditions worded in a way whereby it allows you to move forward faster on site. And my email back to the planning officer was, the government wants us to build faster. All of these conditions require sign off before even breaking a sweat on site. There's no reason why these cannot be discharged in the background whilst works commence on site. It's an 8-month program. So what you're trying to do is speed up your start on site, speed up the time frame in which you can get planning condition sign off, and crack on with the work whilst all of that stuff is happening in the background. So for the archaeological dig, I wanted them to change their wording to prior to the commencement of any below ground works, because that's really all it's relevant to. There's no reason why we can't do any works above. So I wanted the wording to be changed to that. There was another one around protecting the scheme from external noise. Well, why do they need to have all of those details when we're not going to be replacing windows for 5 months down the line? Or, it bears no resemblance for when they sign that off to whether or not we could start the project. Likewise with windows and doors, for the materiality of the windows and doors and the details of the sash frames or the joinery items and the samples of materials, all of those things, there's absolutely no reason why they have to sign off all of those materials before you even put a spade in the ground, when you could be 4 months into the process and not even be in a position to install the new materials or windows and doors. So I'm trying to get that changed to prior to installation, full details of all windows and doors need to be approved, blah, blah, blah. Now that one I think they will push back on, because prior to installation is a bit woolly, but ultimately, even if it's like a prior to fit out or prior to something that is further down the line in terms of our build program and isn't reliant on us getting full sign off from the planning authority before we even start works. We want to be getting the planning approval in place, getting the tender documents created, getting our builder to agree a JCT contract, and then be on site within, let's say, 2 months of getting the planning approval. We don't want to then have to wait 4 months for the planners to drag their heels in signing something off that we're not going to be installing for another 8 months anyway. So that's top tip in terms of what you should be looking to do, getting planning officers to give you the draft planning conditions, pushing back on everything you possibly can to delay some of the sign-offs to allow you to get started on site and get Britain building again faster.
If you got value from this video, make sure you click the subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell, because we release one video at least every week, so be the first to get notified. See you on the next one.